Welcome to Coming from Left Field, where we have conversations about politics, books, and current events with your host, Greg Goddles and Pat Cummings. Our guest today is a poet. As a young Marine in Vietnam, he saw the worst of humanity. Today, he clings to the best: love, art, nature, and friendship. His voice is strong, despairing, nostalgic, and tender. His poems are a testament to a life fully examined, with no regret or hypocrisy left unconfronted. His name is Bill Ehrhart. Let's discuss. Well, warm greetings. We are here with one of our favorite friends of the show, Bill Ehrhart. Welcome, Bill. Where are you located right now?
Well, hi to you and to anybody who's listening out there. I'm in Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, suburban Philadelphia. I actually live in Bryn Mawr. Been here for about 12 years, but I was in Philadelphia for 28 years. So I'm basically southeastern Pennsylvania.
Well, it's just a beautiful day here in the Northwest. I'm in Tacoma, and Greg is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So here we go. The miracles of a Zoom meeting. So this is good. We've had Bill on a couple of times, and he is a Luddite when it comes to technology. So he just does phone interviews, not Zoom interviews. And frankly, that's just fine with us because most of our
In
people listen to our podcast anyway, so he's in good company. So
in
anyway,
in fact, if I could, I'd like to say to whoever's out there listening, watching, um, I have the technical skills of a Chesapeake blue crab.
Mm.
Um, I loathe technology. Um, I have been on Zoom in my entire life. I can count it on all 10 fingers and still have a couple fingers left over. I apologize to those of you who for only doing this by telephone, but the simple fact is Zoom it creeps me out. My ancient desktop computer cannot even do Zoom. My wife occasionally she uses her laptop, and I gather Zoom works very well for a great many people, but I just cannot stand all this technology. I don't think it has made life any better.
Well,
So I do apologize to those of you that I have refused to enter the technological age.
that's too.
it hates us back, Bill. Technology hates us back, so it's only fair that we hate it.
Well,
Well,
I need to stop and give an introduction. Okay,
okay.
next to my sister, Janice O'Mahony, you're my favorite poet. And we came across you a couple of years ago, and have had you on the podcast a couple of times, and every
I
time,
actually think this is the fourth time I've been on your show now.
Yeah.
and every time we have a huge number of people that follow you, so you've got quite a little cult following. I don't know if you know that, but a lot of people enjoy your work. And when I try to describe you, I don't describe you well. I describe you as a poet that was very prominent with the themes of Vietnam. Was on Ken Burns' show as featured prominently with his Vietnam series. Our last time we had you on, you sort of gave the evolution of how you became a writer and a poet. And I don't think you thought of yourself as a writer and a poet until multiple years after you came back from your experience as a Marine and used these tools as a way of processing what you had gone through. Is that relatively correct?
Pretty much so. I started writing poetry when I was 15. The first time I wrote a poem that a teacher didn't make me write, and I have been writing steadily ever since. When I was in my mid 20s, 25 or 26, and I was once again between jobs. I was out of college. I'd had multiple jobs. I realized, somewhat to my dismay, that the only thing I really cared about was writing poetry. And I say with dismay because this was not a happy revelation. Um, I knew enough by that point in my life that you don't make a living writing poetry. And that meant that if this is the thing I wanted to do with my life, I had to figure out some way to keep a roof over my head and food in my belly. And all through uh, my 20s, the decade of my 20s, I mean, I would work I had all kinds of jobs. I worked on merchant ships. I worked for the Department of Justice, Pennsylvania State Department of Justice. I drove a forklift. I built swimming pools. I worked as a reporter. I would work for a few months at a time, save up a little money, and quit, and go and do the one thing that mattered to me, which was writing. And then I'd get another job, and I'd quit that job after a few months. Because I didn't really have any ambitions. I didn't want to have a career. I walked away from multiple careers. I could have gone to law school, um, and all I had to do was take the law boards. And the day that I was supposed to take the law boards, some friends of mine who didn't know I was supposed to do that called me up and said they were going canoeing in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Did I want to go along? I thought, well, I can spend a day canoeing in the Pineys, or I can sit in some classroom taking the law boards. And I thought I'd rather go canoeing. And that was the end of law school. I worked for a newspaper off and on for 4 years, and they kept asking me to, take a full-time position as a reporter. And I thought, nah, I don't want to do this. Um, I walked away from career opportunities because I didn't care about any of that. Um, and so it was awkward to realize that the only thing that really mattered to me was writing poetry. I mean, you got to be nuts to do that in the first place. I got through my 20s by living a life with very low overhead. I mean, I spent months sleeping on friends' couches. I lived with my parents off and on. My expenses were very low, so I didn't need much money. And then in my early 30s, I married a woman who actually thought that what I did was pretty cool. And for much of the first 20 years of our marriage, she supported me while I while I sat around writing poetry, working half-ass jobs, making a little money, quitting again. But Annie was, unlike me, she has real technical skills. She, in fact, was a systems engineer for 20 years, worked for a bank in the computer section of a bank, and she'd go off to work every day and sit in an office and do that crap that I was simply not willing to do, while she basically supported me. That's something that I was able to get away with because of changing cultural attitudes. I mean, one of the last pieces of my education was gender, learning about gender equality and stuff like that. I had a professor in graduate school, Judith Gardner, wonderful woman, used to drive me crazy. Every time I'd use the masculine pronoun for the indefinite noun, she'd call me out on it. She'd call me out for calling, a policeman a fireman, and it would drive me nuts. But she was such an interesting person that I kept coming back to her. I would hang out in her class, in her office. This is at University of Illinois, Chicago. And finally, it dawned on me that Judith was not talking about liberating women. She was talking about liberating me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me to, I spent almost 20 years with my wife supporting me. And it didn't bother me. My father would have been laughed out of Percy, Pennsylvania, if he had lived the kind of life I did. But I was cool with that. Now, the irony is that in my early 50s, I was hired interestingly enough, by an ex-U.S. Army colonel, 30-year colonel. I was hired by the Haverford School for Boys, and I spent almost 20 years teaching English and history there at the same time that my wife was laid off from Mellon Bank. Over the course of our 45-year marriage, pretty much she supported me for the first half of our marriage, and then I've supported her for the second half of it. So it's kind of balanced out cosmically, but
Well, you need
that
to
was not a plan.
back up and talk a little bit more about the Haverford School. First of all, I need to fill in a few things. I
Go ahead.
mean, you went on and became quite a good educator. You got a doctorate. You taught at this school that is not just any school. This is a very exclusive East Coast school that has had remarkably famous people that have graduated from it. One of whom is Smedley Butler. We did one of our podcasts on you and your relationship with Smedley Butler, who is a graduate of Haverford and is a very, very, very famous Marine that became kind of an anti-war activist. Uh, and if you look at the books that you have written, I'll put these up on the screen for those who are watching. The one that we just chatted with you about last was What We Can and Can't Afford: Essays on Vietnam, Patriotism, and American Life. Prior to that, we chatted with you about Thank You for Your Service, which was a collection of poems with your regarding your military experience. A Vietnam Percocet, Busted, and Passing Time, a kind of a trilogy of books. It goes on in the shadow of Vietnam. Essays, Marking Time, Passing Time, uh, uh, Dead on a High Hill. There's got to be 40 books here that I'm looking at that you've written.
Well, actually, it's not 40, but it's quite a few. And I just, if you look at all of the poetry titles, those all get lumped into my Thank You for Your Service collected poems that was published in 2019. And that
Right.
contains 308 poems. That is essentially my life as a poet up until 2019. Now, what's interesting is that, I mean, I know there's a picture of me standing in front of a tank on the cover, but of those 308 poems, fewer than a third of them deal in any way, shape, or form with the Vietnam War, and 20% of them, only 1 in 5, deal with the Vietnam War in particular. As you point out, and I have this on the back of the new book, Smart Fish Don't Bite. I put on the cover, as the poems in this most recent collection demonstrate, I am a writer who fought in Vietnam, not a Vietnam writer.
Right.
Right. A lot of my books, I just signed, interestingly enough, just a week ago, I signed another contract with McFarland and Company, my prose publisher, for yet another collection of essays. This will be my 5th essay collection. And this is the 11th book that McFarland has published of mine, going back to 1983. I've had a long, long relationship with these folks who have been very good to me over the years. They even did my collected poems, and they don't publish poetry at all. I'm the only poet they've ever published, which is pretty cool. But as you see, well, my reputation is unfortunately rooted in my writing about the Vietnam War, but in fact, the body of my work goes far beyond that. I have, in my 40s, I slowly learned to accept the fact that I'm going to be associated with the Vietnam War no matter what, because if I were not associated with the Vietnam War, I would not be associated with anything. No one would even know I'm on the literary radar scope, because that's what happens to most writers who are at my level of success, or whatever you want to call it. So I don't get invited to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference or the Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Festival. I get invited to things like TED Plus 20 and Vietnam and America, from war to peace to reconciliation. Those are the kinds of things I get invited to. But if I weren't invited to those kind of things, I wouldn't be invited to anything. Who the hell's ever heard of me? Nobody.
I think what we need to do is maybe start with a poem. And how
Well,
about
here's
go ahead.
you got one in mind?
I want, well, this morning I was with 5 or 6 old farts. We go out and get coffee. Every time my Alexa says coffee with old farts. And it reminded me with you with your eating oysters in Easton,
Ah,
where you're with a couple
yeah.
of your buddies, and it's to a certain extent it is maybe about vet things because there's some of your vet
Well, it
buddies, but
is.
it's about more mortality. It's about love of your and love and companionship of your wife. It's about the fact that you're going to be dead in a couple of years and you're
All
trying
right, here we
to
go.
squeeze out happiness.
Eating oyster. Here
Would
we
you
go.
read that
Eating
for us?
oysters. Yeah.
Fif-
Here we go. Um, Eating oysters in Easton, and it's dedicated to Ron Farisi and Scott Moore. And this is at the Third and Ferry Fish Market in Easton, Pennsylvania. So here we are together again, old friends for over 50 years. An Army infantry platoon commander, an aerial scout with a silver star, a Marine with a Purple Heart. Vietnam veterans against the war in the days when we were hailed by some as heroes and as traitors by the rest. We've brought our wives today, 150 years of marriage between us, and still just one apiece. Patient women, durable, lucky boys. The waitress just keeps bringing oysters. We keep saying, just bring more. The check is going to break the bank at Monte Carlo, but who cares? We're happy. Who knows how much longer we've got left, and we can't take it with us. Oysters! Bring more oysters!
there you go. That's it. That captures it. Um,
Interestingly enough, that Ronnie Farisi, I won't be seeing Scott, but I'm going to be seeing Ronnie in October. Um, a small gathering of a number of old buddies from Vietnam veterans against the war, who are getting together at a one of those, what do you call it, a Airbnb up in the Poconos.
mhm, mhm.
For one of the guys is having his 80th birthday, and he decided let's just have a big birthday party.
Well,
So
in your in I'm going to bring Greg in here, but while I'm thinking of this, I'd like to say it. In your introduction, you talk about you didn't know if you were going to write another poetry book. You just kept writing, and all of a sudden you end up having
yeah,
you have your poems, and they are in a series in which you wrote them. I'm kind of I'm like my father. I say the same joke over and over again and people get tired of it. One of it is when I haven't seen a friend in a long time, I go, "Holy crap, I'm surprised. I thought you died." And 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 that is kind of a theme that's going in your poems is like, let's face it. I mean, well, we've got 10 years in us before we're both you can stick a fork in us. We're going to be cognitively or
really.
physically gone here soon. And that eating oysters is a way of you just capturing the companionship, the love, your family, your friends. Just it to me exemplifies this stage of your life and our life where we're just trying to squeeze out good times, fun, and happiness. I don't know. Did I get that right?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know how I made it this long. If I were my father, I'd already be dead for 8 years. If I were my mother, I'd only be dead for 7 years. I went through the windshield of a car when I was 15 years old. Actually, going through wasn't so bad. It was coming back again that did all the damage. I had this RPG go off right next to me when I was 19 years old. I should have been dead then. I drove drunk for 50 years. Um, I don't know why I'm still here. This is like a fluke of the universe. Um, but I am still here, and I'm certainly conscious of the fact that I'm not going to be around much longer. None of us are. We're all getting old.
Yeah.
And as I said, I still write some pretty heavy duty poems. This book has got lots of them in here, but there's some fun things. And in terms of this particular collection, the problem with doing a collected poems, which I published in 2019, the problem with that is when you do it before you're dead, what do you do with the stuff that you write after your collected poems get published? I can't put them in a new edition of collected poems. Who the hell's going to buy 308 poems all over again just to get 40 new ones? And McFarland, as I said, they do not want to be publishing poetry. They did my collected poems basically as a favor to me. But they don't. I'm the only poet they've ever published, and they weren't interested in doing this book. This new book is, I think it's like 75 or 76 poems. It's less than 100 pages. They don't want to be involved in something like that. Luckily for me, there's a fellow here in Philadelphia, a man named Larry Robin, who runs an outfit called Moonstone Arts Center, and they have a press. And I've known Larry for many, many years, so he was willing to do this new collection of poems, and I'm delighted that he was willing to do that, and it came out beautifully. But it is a problem. I have another problem with. I have an archive at LaSalle University. All of my papers, all sorts of stuff, is over in the LaSalle, their Connolly Library. But the problem with setting up an archive before you're dead is, what do you do? I've lived another 10 years since then. I keep taking boxes of stuff. About once a year, I'll take a big box of stuff over for them to add to the collection, because I keep being alive and I keep adding to the archive.
Greg, how about you? Jump in here.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
I like a lot of your political stuff. This go around I didn't read I read your Vietnam stuff, but it didn't catch my attention the way some of your political stuff did. But there were some non-political poems that I appreciated because they touched a nerve, and one in particular was "Things My Mother Gave Me." And
Yes.
you begin by saying, and I'd like you to read it, but let me just read this first part. When I went off to
Yeah.
college in '69, my mother gave me a Webster's New World Collegiate Dictionary. I put the book down when I read that line. I went over to my stack of family heirlooms over here, and I pulled out, and you can't see it, a copy of Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. And in the frontispiece, the front cover has fallen off over the years, and the binding is gone and shot to hell. But inside it says, "This is the property of Gregory Paul Goddles." That's the way my aunt who raised me always inscribed my books. Christmas 1957. So as soon as I read that, it brought back the same kind of memories that your poem evoked about, family and gifts from people in your family. So I would like you to read that if you don't mind.
Not at all. And I'm trying to. I can't even remember what triggered this poem. Sometimes I remember the triggers and sometimes I don't. But here it is. Things My Mother Gave Me. When I went off to college in 1969, my mother gave me a Webster's New World Collegiate Dictionary and the money to buy a typewriter. I chose an Olivetti, lightweight and portable, Believe it or not, along with shooting a rifle and close order drill, the Marines taught me to type with all 10 fingers. When I went to graduate school in Chicago 8 years later, my mother bought me a briefcase and a winter coat for the windy city. The coat kept me from freezing to death through two of the coldest and snowiest winters I've ever encountered, and I wore it for years till it finally became so threadbare my wife insisted I buy a new one. The typewriter lasted a dozen years through college and grad school, years of correspondence, dozens of poems typed and sent out and rejected and typed again and sent out again, and every now and then a cigar. I even typed my first memoir on it, draft after draft after draft for 2 long years, hundreds of pages, a lot of whiteout. The briefcase lasted even longer. I still have it, and it still works. Though at 76 and mostly retired, I've got little need for it now. And I certainly haven't used that ancient dictionary, now so out of date that usages have changed and words that didn't exist 55 years ago are part of everyday vocabulary. Who needs a dictionary when you've got the internet and spell check? But I keep mine anyway. I haven't opened it for years, but I'll never let it go. My mother gave it to me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I had that same sentiment. I mean, you ask yourself, of all the crap I have that I'm inundated with, that's choking me in this house, I would never give that that dictionary up. I'd never throw that in the dumpster. And like you, in the course of growing up, I got a portable typewriter. I think I finally threw it away about 2, 3 years ago. I kept it in my closet. But the best thing I got, and that's the most important to me, was a Wollensack tape recorder with a thin tape, and I kept it. And I had the good sense when I was a teenager. I was in love with my grandmother, my Italian American grandmother, and I taped her. I taped 3 or 4 reels of interviews with her, and I kept them in her broken English. And all my cousins and my aunts, they weren't interested in that until they all got old and they all wanted copies. Of course, I made them copies of those interviews. But those gifts that I got growing up, like your gifts, they meant so much to me, so much more than the other crap I'm surrounded with.
Well,
Well,
what I like about what I like about this, and I hate to interrupt, but I'm
go
thinking of it.
ahead, go ahead.
Uh, it's simple. It's a dictionary. It's a typewriter. You're a writer. You know, it's the trade. It's the warmth of your mother's coat, the love, the care, the nurturing of your mother. It's the briefcase, your professionalism, your career, your adulthood. And you mentioned you were a Marine. They taught you to type, but this is more. This is so much more. That's just a small part of who you are. It's all of these other things, and this poem is short. It's a page long. It doesn't go on and on. It gets to the point. And it's a goddamn good poem.
Well, thank you.
It's an emotional poem. It's after you read it, you do get kind of a lump in your throat and think of the nurturing of your mother and your old possessions and how they bring back floods of memories. I don't know. It's well done. Well played, old man. Well
Well,
played.
thank you, thank you. And that typewriter, it's really interesting because I did write the whole draft of Vietnam Percy I did on that little Olivetti portable. When the book was finished and I finally got a contract from McFarland to publish it, I rewarded myself by going out and buying an IBM electric typewriter. Now, why in the hell I didn't spend the money to buy it before I cranked out what must have been several thousand pages, because it took me over 2 years and multiple drafts to get that book written. But I bought this electric typewriter, and then by the time that I was working on Passing Time, which was the second book in the memoir sequence, I had already gotten the original, the old Apple IIe desktop computer, which was really an interesting experience. It had no hard drive, so you could write about 15 pages of text, and then you had to dump it onto a floppy disk and start again. But I never actually wrote a book on that electric typewriter. So and the little Olivetti that I had lasted longer. It stayed in my possession longer than the electric typewriter did.
Yeah.
Well, you've proved you're a Luddite, but I'd like to hear you reading more poetry if you don't mind. And one
Well,
of
I've got one up here right now, and
wait, wait,
if you
wait,
got
whoa,
any,
whoa, whoa, wait a minute. You're picking what you like. I want you to read what I like.
all right, what do you want?
Because so Night Stalkers, and the reason I like it is because again, it begins with rural life. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and we called them sleepouts. We would go to a backyard, and all we didn't have anything sophisticated, just some blankets, and we'd sit under the stars and have all nighters like that. And we'd go to the creek. We'd go there too and do the same thing and get eaten up by the
Yeah,
mosquitoes and the chiggers and all that stuff. So if that brought all those kind of memories back to me, and the night prowling that we did when we were kids, and the water balloons we used to throw on Illinois Route 1 at trucks and stuff like that. So would you read that and bring memories
sure.
back to me?
And it's interesting. At one point well, I'll come back to that. Here's the poem. It's called Night Stalkers. Back in the 50s and early 60s, small town rural Pennsylvania, kids could camp with their buddies in somebody's backyard or even the public park down by the creek. Our parents never worried about us. Pedophiles didn't lurk in the bushes. Nobody locked their doors. There'd been only one murder in Percy folks could remember. Burglaries few, kidnappings never. We would wander the streets for the sheer excitement of being afoot while the whole town slept. The town's one cop car, easy enough to avoid, hide in the bushes. Imagine we're soldiers on patrol, evading the Krauts and the Japs. The sound of a dog barking, maybe another, barking at cats, barking at us or the moon like a Cheshire cat, or a face, the man in the moon, the Milky Way, the Big Dipper. How could we have known what awaited us in the darkness of future years, too young to even imagine a future, let alone our own? Once we raided Old Man Bowen's garage, knowing he always kept cookies and cokes in his workshop fridge, but we didn't take them all.
Hmm.
I
Nice.
actually had somebody suggest that wanted me to take the Krauts and the Japs, especially the Japs, out of the poem because that was racist. That was, you can't use those terms. But in the late 50s, we grew up in the shadow. All of the parents, the fathers of the kids I grew up with were World War II veterans. And that's what you called the enemy. They were the Krauts and the Japs. So to change that terminology for 21st century sensibilities is ridiculous. That's what they were. It's what we called them. So I left them in there, and I eventually found an editor at this was published in a magazine called Ibbotson Street, and that editor didn't seem to object to my use of these terms because they're historically accurate.
My father fought in Saipan, and that was when I read that poem, I immediately thought of him because he was the most kind, loving, wonderful person. But by God, it was Japs all of his life. Japs, Japs,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and it's just like, okay, are you gonna go and rewrite Huck Finn? I mean, Jesus Christ, that was the times.
yeah.
That's how they thought.
But
That's how they.
part of the horror of war is coming to grips with the usage of those terms. I mean,
That's
you're,
right.
you're not doing justice to the horror of war if you don't include the dehumanizing of people as they always do in wars. Everybody gets dehumanized. That's what you got to do to make people kill. And if you lose that, you're not going to convey to young people what war is like. And
Well, and the sensibilities of this poem are of young kids, late, elementary age, maybe junior high kids in the late 1950s and very early 1960s.
no,
That's
nobody in
that's
my
the
neighborhood,
context.
nobody in my neighborhood was more of a war hawk than me when I was growing up. I mean, I had
Yeah.
gear. I was out crawling around pretending like I was at war. Unlike you, I realized at some point I didn't want to do that, and I didn't do that, and I purposely didn't do that. But that wasn't the way I was raised like that. We were crawl. That's why I like the poem. That's exactly my
Yeah.
mentality at that time in my life. And I like people to know it because I got over it. I mean, it's part of my
Yeah.
journey that I learned to get over that. I learned to move beyond that.
I was a little slower to catch on, but
My
but
my buddy I work out with is a Marine Corps vet, Vietnam vet. He was there in '66, I think, '67. And same thing. We have the same conversation. He says the same thing. I said, I was scared shitless with authority. And so when I realized that I wasn't going to be a war hero automatically if I joined up, I was going
uh,
to be bossed around by somebody that might cost me my life. I don't want to be part of it. He said, I had to go to find that out. So
well,
it's a different experience.
my wife has two brothers, both of whom one of them is my age, 6 months older than me. One of them is a couple years younger than me. But they grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which back in the '60s was rural. And they grew up playing war and cowboys and Indians and all that stuff. And both of them became conscientious objectors during the Vietnam War. Um,
They,
it's just
they served
who
when they
knows?
were kids. They served when they were
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Well, and
Um,
that's part of the theme of the poem. You're juxtaposing the past
sure.
safety. You could be out all night and your parents didn't care to compare to our future, darkness that we live now. And, children raiding a neighbor's refrigerator versus real crime. I mean, it's just, that's the theme. So
Yeah, yeah.
what do you want to read?
Well, I had called up what I'm doing here actually because I can't hold the telephone and find stuff in a book and hold the book open at the same time. I'm actually calling these poems up on my computer screen. And I had pulled up when you mentioned Smedley Butler. Um, as I
Smedley
said, he
Butler's
is,
grave?
yes, he is a graduate of the Haverford School for Boys, class of 1898. Um, but when I got to the Haverford School, he had been written out of the history of the school. We talked about this during that show
Right.
because when he became a critic of American foreign policy, what today we would call the military industrial complex, um, the community, the Haverford School community, which then was rich white Republicans, mostly Episcopalians, um, they considered Butler to be a traitor to his class of people because they were all making money on munitions and crap like that. And they wrote him out of the history of the school. And it was only when I got there through a weird fluke of a fairly well-to-do alum from the '70s and this retired Army colonel headmaster, and the three of us resurrected Smedley Butler's memory on the Haverford School campus. But here's the poem. It's called "At Smedley Butler's Grave." And he grew up. He was a local boy. Grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Um, so here's the poem. I'm literally at Smedley Butler's grave. So here I am with Smedley Butler, Major General, Maverick Marine, Old Gimlet Eye, the Stormy Petrel, two-time Medal of Honor winner. Me, a sergeant with a Purple Heart, for doing nothing but getting hit. Don't kid yourself. There's nothing heroic in that. just bad luck. Yet here I am at Butler's grave. But why? Well, we were both Marines, there's that, and he graduated in 1898 from the school where I taught decades later for 18 years. And he wrote a book called War is a Racket, in which he concluded, "To hell with war." How can you not love a guy like that? He was such a bundle of contradictions. You know, he was writing letters to his congressman father when he was a 17-year-old lieutenant in Panama, going, "What the hell are we doing down here? All we're doing is making rich white bankers a lot of money and screwing the natives." And yet he continued. His career lasted 34 years, even though he knew what he was doing was bullshit. But he simply loved the adrenaline rush of being in the middle of the action. He loved combat. And he
Well,
didn't really become an outspoken critic until he reached a rank where he knew he would never be put in command in the field again.
what I got out of this poem, he's a general, you're a sergeant, you're both Marines. He has more war medals than any Marine. You got a Purple Heart. But you both share the heroicism and the legacy that a soldier can leave, that it's not just their medals and their combat, but it's the wisdom and reflection of what they learn from that. And you both share that in spades. He became an
Well,
activist and you became an activist. And you are brothers from another mother when it comes to those concepts and themes. And you're a little mini me, Smedley Butler, in a way.
well, I don't know. He's a fascinating character, and part of what fascinates me so much is he's such a contradictory person. I mean,
As are you.
he was saying, well, I didn't stay in. I had multiple opportunities to make a career in the Marine Corps. They wanted to send me to Annapolis, um, and I, no thanks.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they actually offered me when I was in North Carolina after Vietnam. They asked me. They were going to send me to drill instructor school. Um, but but you needed to have a minimum of 1 year of active duty after you finished DI school, and I would have had to extend my enlistment by 9 days in order to become a drill instructor. And I told them, nope. I'm getting out on June the 17th, 1969. I ain't extending for 24 hours. I'm out of here. So in that respect, I figured out very quickly this is not the life for me.
I've got one for you. Um,
Okay.
you're a bicycle gal. Okay. Cycling,
Oh,
cycling in, how
yeah,
do you,
yeah.
how do you pronounce it? Cycling in
Vésinet, which, and I'm not French. It might be Vésinet for all I know. Uh, but
this, go
I
ahead.
was reading a fascinating book um, about a guy, a black Major. What was his name? Major Jackson. Oh crap! I can't remember his last name now. But he was. This is around the turn of the century. He was an incredible bicycle racer, but he couldn't race in the United States because he was black. So he had this long career in Europe racing bikes. I mean, he won the world championship in 1901. Um, he was amazing, but he in the course of reading this biography of him, I'm not going to take the time to go and find it now, but I should be able to figure out this guy's name for you. In the course of it, um, there was mention of this painting by a Frenchman, butcher the name, Léon Francois Comerre, Comerre. And it's and the painting itself is called Cycling at Vésinet or Vésinet, whichever you pronounce it. And it's this strikingly wonderful painting, oil painting of a woman with a bicycle. And I ended up so struck by the painting that I wrote this poem, Cycling at Vésinet. The woman is French, young, attractive. She wears a white blouse and tan culottes. The liberating, often controversial fashion that allows her to sit astride the bike she holds upright in her left hand. Her right hand, perched jauntily on her right hip, holds a white, soft-brimmed cloth cap. Her long hair, the color of her pants, falls down her back. She has what appears to be a flower tucked behind her left ear. She looks directly at the artist, neither smiling nor sad, but pensive, as if to say, "This is who I am. I enjoy riding my bicycle. I enjoy riding alone, by myself. I don't need you, though I might deign to let you ride beside me for a while, if you keep in mind that I want nothing from you, nothing. I have my bike. That's all I need." And
And
of course,
go
part of
ahead.
what's going on, and what I found so fascinating about the poem, is that this biography of the Black American cyclist talks about how the bicycle really ended up providing a kind of liberation for uh, people, but women in particular, because they could now get around Paris and get around uh, France by themselves. They didn't need a car. They didn't have to put themselves on public transportation. Um, they could simply get on a bicycle and go someplace on their own.
And this was, and anybody could with any means,
Yeah,
and and
yeah.
there was a backlash to it, in a way.
Oh
Um,
yes, because these culottes were outrageous. What are the women wearing these? It's like bloomers. The painting is dated 1903, by the way. So we're talking
well, I
way back.
will. After I read that, somehow I came across your Hollywood Progressive article with all of the backstory about it. And then when I read the poem again, it just brought it alive for me so well. So anyway, I'll link to that article in the show notes so people can have the same experience I did with
Okay,
that.
good.
Yeah. Oh God, there's so goddamn many. We've got to get to your poems were in sequence of the way you wrote them, and Trump kind of comes up over and over again with
It's
your
like
frustration from them, and they're always these snarky little funny sarcastic poems. Um, I don't know. There's so many of them that were good. I like the one of you talking about the trajectory of various soup cans throwing. That was a good one.
yeah.
His failures. I don't know. Pick a Trump poem that you think would
He's
be.
he he's like he's like a zombie. He's like the undead. He won't he won't go away.
I know.
Uh,
He just
it's
comes
worse than
back.
ever now.
Oh God. Let's just
There is
pray to.
there is one poem in here that I have to well, I won't read it because I can't. It's called "Hail to the Freakin' Chief," and I've used the word "freakin" instead of the f bomb because I figured that I I would have trouble selling a book, especially to libraries and stuff, if they encounter the f bomb probably 50 times in the course of this poem. Uh, but interestingly enough, and I have a footnote at the end of the poem, a fellow I know who runs Iniquity Press, a guy named Dave Roscoe. I happen to share the original version with him, which is "Hail to the F Bomb Chief," And he said, "I'll print that." So you can actually you can actually find the original version in his magazine, Big Hammer. Long. I want to do the what's it called, Soup Can Blues.
Soup. Okay, so
That's a good one.
get the backstory on that. Where that one came from.
Uh, it is actually something that Trump was complaining. This is during his first presidency. He was complaining that you know people would the protesters, people supporting Black Lives Matter and stuff they would use soup cans. They would throw cans at
Rather
the
than
police,
rocks. Right.
and, to try to injure the police. And I have a friend named Harry Haynes, a wonderful guy, a veteran, um, who said something about, somebody ought to make a poem out of this, of what Trump said about throwing soup cans. And I took him up on his challenge. So this is Soup Can Blues. Our president says the left-wing mob are throwing soup cans at our cops instead of bricks. Easier to throw, and if you're caught, you can always say you're only trying to feed the kids. It's true that you can get a better grip on Campbell's cream of mushroom or Progresso Italian-style wedding than you're going to get on a brick. And a can's more aerodynamic, too. But what's all this about soup? What's the matter with baked beans, canned peaches, pineapple chunks, Chef Boyardee SpaghettiOs? Surely hungry kids will eat that stuff. Or even tuna fish. Those little cans like flat stones or silver dollars. Man, you'd get some wicked speed with those, like throwing fastballs at a batter's head. Cruising the aisles of a looted grocery store, the possibilities are endless. Armor Star, Amy's Organic, Wild Planet. That's the trouble with our president. He can't tell the truth to save his ass, and still has no imagination. He can't tell the truth. It seems congenitally incapable of
Okay,
actually telling the truth.
the soup
But don't
thing
get me
was it
started on him.
the soup thing was a couple of years ago. Two
Yeah.
two 2 or 3 days ago, he's talking about how he's going to beautify all of our sidewalks by bringing in the Augusta green golfing grass and plant them next to the curb and the sidewalk. And of course, the curbs are all broken and smashed up because protesters take hammers, break up the curbs so they can take chunks of the curb and throw it at police. That
Oh,
true story 2 days ago. And it reminded me of, he just keeps on giving and giving these great little tidbits. This was the soup poem was based again on on a true comment he made. I don't know. You need to upgrade
yeah.
it to the people breaking up the curbs to throw chips of curbs at police. That's the modern
Yeah.
version.
Well, I'm trying to find some of my other Trump poems. As I said, he won't go away. He just it's just unbelievable. And I mean, I don't want to dwell on this, but I think that the future of this country looks very, very bleak. Uh, here. I'll read this one. Let's see. MAGA voters lament. It's called MAGA voters lament, and it's got an epigraph saying a pipe dream. First, they came for the undocumented immigrants, and I did not speak out because I was happy to get rid of them. Then they came for the foreign students, and I did not speak out because they were foreign. Then they came for the green card holders, and I did not speak out because they were taking Americans' jobs. Then they came for the Muslims, and I did not speak out because they weren't Christians. Then they came for the judges who ruled against them, and I did not speak out because judges are usually way too liberal. Then they decided that my job was an unnecessary waste of money, and they fired me. Then they took away my VA benefits, Social Security, and Medicare, and it dawned on me that I might have a serious problem. Then they came for anyone who spoke out against them, and I found myself in what we used to call in the Marines the hurt locker.
Hmm.
When they tore up the Constitution and burned the pieces, I realized I'd never actually read the damn thing. And as the rich white billionaires were stuffing the ashes down my throat, it finally occurred to me that I had made a terrible mistake. But by then I was screwed, and there was nothing I could do about it. Now, I call that, MAGA voters lament, I call it a pipe dream because apparently, even though everything this man is doing is screwing the hell out of the ordinary people who voted for him, they keep supporting him. It's just it I it's I don't even know what to say. It's just astounding. I
It's well, what any thoughts on that political commentary, Greg?
Yeah, well, I think you look at the numbers, you can see there's disenchantment. It's not really about the people. It never really is because we don't really live in a democracy. So when you look at the poll numbers going down for Trump and you look at alarm about a number of things that he's doing, um, people don't have a recourse. I mean, what's the recourse? Vote Democratic the next time when Schumer Schumer doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't. They don't. They're not running. They're running against Trump because he's Trump. Will win. It'll all fall in our lap. And what are you going to do? Nothing. We're about to have an economic crisis, and with him in power, it's just going to get exacerbated because he's in power, doesn't know what to do, doesn't have a clue to what to do, and it's a shit show. So
Yeah.
I don't blame the people. I mean, the people they've been given two options: Republicans, Democrats. They give the Democrats a shot, then they give the Republicans a shot, and we get deeper and deeper into this pit. So yeah, I mean, I share your frustration, but I don't blame the people. I don't know who are they going to vote for.
maybe you don't vote. Maybe you get out in the goddamn street and stop things. Put
Yeah.
put
Well,
stop things.
that's what we
How
have to
about
do.
major strikes? How
I
about major
well that
walkouts? How
that
let
that's
you
that,
know?
that's what Bill. That's funny you brought that up because I just wrote about it. I mean, it's the sad commentary. If you want to get mad, I get mad at. I've been a trade unionist whenever I worked in my life, but the union leadership is something. I mean, 400,000 jobs lost in the VA. The union, not the jobs lost. Their union membership was just sucked away from them. AFGE, the union that represents almost all VA workers, did nothing. I get a note from my friends at the AFL-CIO saying, write to my legislator. What they would have done in the 30s is they'd been out in the streets.
Right.
What they would have done in the
Yeah.
30s is they would call for a general strike. What they would have done in the 30s is they would have had a march on Washington, et cetera. I can go on and on, just as you was about to
Yeah.
say. Here, you're told to write to your legislator. Write to
Well,
your
but this
legislator.
is where I do blame the people for being unwilling to actually do so. You know, there are lots of options besides voting for a Republican or a Democrat. Somebody ought to be throwing sand into the gears of the system.
Right.
Takes leadership
Um,
for that. You have to have leaders. There's no one stepping up to lead.
well, I'm not entirely sure that there's
Well,
no one stepping up to lead.
related to your poem, I just got back from Vegas. I think we talked before, which I would highly recommend you not do. And as we are driving to the airport, we're in a car with a woman, and she had an accent. And we said, where are you from? She said, I'm from Chile, and I have been here for 40 years, 4 decades.
Yeah.
And she'd had various jobs, and she's taken us in a Uber to the airport. And well, I said, well, you were probably there when Pinochet was there. And she said, I was. I loved Pinochet. And I said, well, tell me more. He brought order and structure. He was just a wonderful president. And I said, but wasn't he the guy that was kind of throwing people out of helicopters and disappearing everybody? And he kind of had some problems with violence and civilians, that wasn't him. That was the people that he hired, and he couldn't control everything that they did.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the next question was, the next logical question was, well, what do you think about our present president? I absolutely love him. Trump is wonderful, but he's doing some kind of bad stuff. No, that's not Trump. That's the people that he hired. So, back to your poem, first they came for the trade unionists, first they came for
Yeah.
the Jews, first these people are convinced that he is a savior, and as your list goes on and you keep checking off these, and then they came, and then they came, that's the Uber driver taking me to the airport. She loves him.
Well, I hate
So
to say it, but most people are distressingly ignorant, ill-informed, and don't want to know what's actually going on.
yeah.
There are, Greg, to your point, there are actually people in Philadelphia who are trying very hard to organize resistance to what has been happening, but they're getting no support. They're getting very little support, and certainly the media is the newspapers and television and I guess so much stuff now goes on so-called social media, which doesn't strike me as all that social. Um, but they're not reporting this stuff. They're not telling people this is available to you. If you want to protest, go see this group. But there's entities out there right here in Philadelphia who are trying to do stuff. There's a march going on right now. You may not know about it. A bunch of people, partly organized around Code Pink and some other groups like that, who are actually walking. They started on Saturday. They're carrying a copy of the Constitution from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. Every day they go, I don't know, 10 miles or whatever it is. It's going to take them a couple of weeks. There ought to be 5,000 people marching with this group. There's probably 50 because nobody knows about it. It doesn't get reported.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's out there.
there's the fear factor when you look at the demonstrations on the campuses against Israeli
Yeah.
genocide.
Yeah.
Unlike in the '60s, what I'm familiar with, and the repression is incredible by the universities. And universities were caught in the vice of appearing to be liberals. They were all liberals, and so they wanted to appear to be liberals. So they had to give some leeway to the demonstrators in the '60s. And many of us committed certain outrages actually and got away with it because they were liberals. The university administrators aren't liberals anymore. They're all chicken shit, and that's part of the problem. There's an
Well,
article in the
yeah.
paper today about students coming back, but they're a bit intimidated because of the
Yeah.
repression. And you're right. I mean, I'm out in the streets. I was February 20th. I was on a cold street corner, and 3 years ago, saying no war in Ukraine, and there were 12 of us, and so I felt the same frustration. There were only 12 of us that cared about a war in Ukraine and all of Pittsburgh. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's frustrating, but we got to keep at it, and
I don't know.
takes
It
time.
just a good poem though, Bill. It's the classic warning about patterns of authoritarianism and the
Yeah.
personal
It's Pastor Nemor's poem. Pastor Nemor.
choosing tribalism and just the issue that we're losing our democracy, and put a little ammonia in your nose and wake up a bit here, and I don't know. Well
Well,
done.
I do actually take some uh one needs to remember, for instance, we're losing our democracy. It really wasn't all that great a democracy to begin with. Um, the who is allowed to vote has expanded over the course of the history of this country, but this country was founded by rich white men it has always been run by rich white men. That is as true today as it was in 1787. The locus of power has never shifted. Money is power, and the money is held in the hands primarily of rich white men. So and you think what's going on now is the destruction of democracy. Go back and look at the pictures of the Ku Klux Klan marching down Pennsylvania Avenue by the thousands in their white robes and pointy hats, carrying American flags, every one of them. You ever seen those pictures? 1924. It's amazing. The intolerance of American society, the kind of tribalism and hatred, none of this is new. None of this is new. And I find not exactly a comfort in that, but it's worth keeping in historical perspective. What are we losing? You and I are losing something, but we think it's more important than it really is. Pax Romana lasted 250 years, period. The British Empire, sun never used to set on the British Empire. Where's all that stuff now? The United States isn't going to be the badass boss of the world forever. That was never going to be the case, and we just happen to be living in the decline and fall of the American empire. But it wasn't really an empire to be all that proud of to begin with, when you figure it was built on the backs of black slaves from Africa, who are now we're now learning that, oh, wait a minute, they were given free passage to America and job training. Who can complain about that? Anyway, it's
funny, Greg. I mean, it's funny because Greg and I, before you came on, we were talking about his new article in Marxist-Leninist Today, the two-party duplicity, and that was the theme. Is that that's one of the themes. But I was asking him if he had listened to the new Edward Klein article in the New York Times that we are losing our democracy, and we are already in fascism. And Greg yelled at me, like he always does, saying, "We've never had democracy."
No, I mean that's
here.
So and beyond that historical realization that this country was never an open, tolerant democracy. The Constitution has been ignored on multiple occasions throughout history. But even think about the universe we live in. Do you realize that there are billions, not a billion, there are billions of galaxies out there? And every one of those galaxies has billions of planets. There are more galaxies in the universe than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth. It is mind-boggling. You can't even get your brain around the concept of how vast this universe is. The fact is, guys, the universe doesn't really care about us. It doesn't even notice us. We think we're important. We think we're the cat's meow, but the universe doesn't care about what's happening on planet Earth, and we'll be long gone before the sun even runs out of hydrogen. And I actually do take some comfort in that. It's important to you and me what happens tomorrow, what happens next week, but in the grand scheme of the universe, none of this matters. It just doesn't. So you do what you can do. I come back to the Serenity Prayer, which, and I don't mind saying this. I'm not supposed to say which 12-step program I belong to, but I'm in a 12-step program. Put on your thinking cap. You can probably figure out which one. I don't drive drunk anymore. But the Serenity Prayer, we've modified it ourselves. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference, and my wife and I have added our own ending to it, and the eyes to see what's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm only a tiny little man in a very big country, in a very big world, in an unimaginably vast universe. There's only so much I can do. So you do what tiny little bit you can, and you let the rest of it go. That's all you can do.
And that might be a good place to stop. So,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah, we're over an hour anyway.
I am going to link to your new book. It's called Smart Fish Don't Bite by W.D. Ehrhart.
Great
And I
title.
will, it is with Moonstone Art Center as the publisher, and I will put a link so they can get this book. This is a great gift for people. It's good to have by your bedside. I liked it. Like I said, I read the doggone
Thank
thing
you.
twice, and just enjoyed it, and keep at it. Don't stop. You know, it's funny. Your introduction was you didn't really plan on writing this book. You just started writing and realized, holy cow, I've got enough poems for a book.
Yeah.
I hope you continue with that pattern.
Well,
Keep
thank
it
you.
up,
I
Bill.
plan
Keep
on
it up. Keep
I
up
will
the
keep
writing.
writing as long as I'm physically capable and until the Trump Gestapo sends me off to Alligator Alcatraz.
Okay.
Writing is life. Writing is life.
So,
We'll see
all
you.
right, guys, it's good to be with you again. Take care.
Thank
See
you.
you
Thank you
sometime.
so much, Bill. This is great.
See you, Bill.
You're welcome.